The plan of our church, we've been trying to reach our neighborhood, which is very diverse. It's most of the people that we've been there for 34 years have moved out, and we have all young couples with cute kids now from all over the world. And so we've got a family from Egypt, and a family from Malaysia, and a family from Tibet. And last week I was taking care of my grandkids on Friday. I was happy to see him because Jackie's out of town visiting. Her dad is not feeling well, and I went to the dollar store just to get some silly toys, like a punching bag and different things like that, and a bubble blowing. And I got a bag for each one of the sets of kids. I came out to try to move my garbage cans. I've had knee surgery. I didn't even know which neighbor had moved my garbage cans. And we had a tree fall down. A neighbor came over and cut up the tree and stacked the wood. In other words, I'm trying to love them into the kingdom of heaven, and they're loving me better than I'm loving them. It's really a big challenge. That's the vision that God has for us. And it comes across in James, is repeated from the words of Jesus. Don't be critical, don't be judging. You're judging the law when you do that. I know God's given us the capacity for critical thinking. It's important, but it can be devastating in your relationship. Can you imagine if you raise your children and you always wish they were someone else, and they have that sense? Well, this is what I think you should be doing, but you're not that way. This is what I wished your hair looked like. I wish that you'd go to 7'2" and sign an MBA scholarship and be a multimillionaire, but you're never going to make it. How terrible that would be for a child. How wonderful it is when a parent is like Jesus Christ and loves them in the majesty and the mystery of who they are. How wonderful it is as a church when we can accept, like we did last week, this is where we are, this is where we're going, this is what we're called to be, and it was just a light feeling around here, as if a weight has taken off of us. And that's what we're in the business of doing. That's the vision that we have. A real team begins with relationships. And that relationship starts when we realize as a church, this is who we are, and God loves us right where we're at. As individuals, this is who we are, and God loves us right where we're at. In fact, He loves us so much, He won't allow us to stay there. He's going to lead us to a better place even. So a real team is relationships. Winston Churchill said, friendships forged in tough times are one of the greatest thrills of teamwork. You know, this church wouldn't be here. I don't know, the way it's worked in 34 years is you have been heroic. Different heroes have stepped up at different times. And every time I can honestly, after I hear about it from Linda or someone like that, I think, man, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that courageous act of heroism. The person that organized the Easter egg hunt in the pool, or all the different things that take place. And it's been fun, hasn't it? It's been the greatest adventure you can possibly imagine, to see people doing the right things for the right reasons, because they love God and they're humbling Him. Real teams begin with relationships, and that takes faith, because we're most vulnerable when we have a relationship. Did you guys see on Jimmy Kimmel, I like to watch Jimmy Kimmel, that he said that he doesn't believe that Gonzaga really exists, talking about the college basketball playoffs. And many Gonzaga fans were insulted by that. And one of them is a national sports broadcaster, and he sent Jimmy Kimmel a challenge through his program, and he said, Jimmy Kimmel, you know that, who's the famous singer that went there? Bing Crosby. We have a statue of Bing Crosby there on the Gonzaga campus. In fact, we invite you to come to Spokane. We'll put you up at the Rib Path Hotel. We'll feed you a great meal, and you can try to go to one of the Gonzaga games, but you won't be able to because they're sold out for 10 years in advance. Whether you believe it or not, Gonzaga exists. Well, we know Gonzaga exists, right? There's people that look up at God and say, you don't exist. I don't believe you exist. I don't think it works when we reach out and love people and accept them where they're at. We stymie our critical and judgmental thinking just to pour God's love into their hearts. That's a very vulnerable place, but it takes a step of bold faith. And then the last one I want to emphasize is the two-way conversation comes when we build relationships God's way. So many questions that Jesus asks. He starts his relationships with questions. He'll ask them, where are you from? Where's your husband? And it begins a conversation. I know that for me, like, I've got a lot to learn. In fact, I have a discussion question for families or people that are driving home. And the discussion question is to ask this question on the way home. If there's no one you're driving with, don't talk. Wait till you find someone to talk to and say, what can we do to improve our ability to have friendship conversations about issues on which we disagree? Because most relationships, we can't talk about what we disagree. And you have to ask questions. I have this bad habit with Jackie and with other people that I like to guess what they're going to say before they say it. So when I see Jackie's back from the Tri-Cities, I'll say, how was your trip? Then I'll say, it was really good, wasn't it? You had a great time with your dad and your brother. She'll be like, let me tell you if you ask me a question. Don't finish it. It wasn't good. I had a flat tire or whatever. And I'll guess like 3 or 4 times. And she'll have to remind me, don't finish my sentences. Or in difficult things to say, I don't understand why you think this, but maybe you can explain it more to myself. And the person actually learns more about themselves by explaining it. Something to talk about. When you really have a relationship like James chapter 4 is talking about, where it says, God alone who gave the law as the judge, he alone has the power to save or to destroy. So what right do you have to judge your neighbor? When you step out of that position and just love people and care for them, speak the truth to them in kindness and love, but as a human being, it might be a question. Have you thought about this? Help me to figure out what I'm missing here. Because we treat them with incredible dignity because God made them. So how do we at Washington Cathedral raise a child? We look at them as a mystery. Wow, we're going to discover what this child's going to be. Then one day, the little girl's up singing a solo, and we're like, none of us knew that she could sing. Or she's playing the violin. Or we find the boy hit a home run. Or the girl hit a home run. Or they're really good at mathematics. Or they have incredible personality in relating to people, incredible people skills. And we wonder, we just go, wow, what a masterpiece. Knowing ahead of time that every one of you are a masterpiece. There's no one else in all the world like you. There's a lady that was a part of our church. She's from Japan. Her name's Katsu. She passed away last week, and it was a miracle because her family was here last night because Pastor Michael showed up just at the moment. They prayed, God, help us with this transition. She is such an amazing Christian in heaven now. They have a big hole in their life, and we do. But every time there was someone from Japan, I would go over to Katsu and I'd say, Katsu, would you introduce this family? Would you speak to them? And she would do more than that. She loved to cook. She'd have them over for a Japanese meal. Man, you never had a Japanese meal unless you had Katsu prepare you one. And she would talk about the culture that she loves so much and the extended family that she reached out to. A miracle, a masterpiece. No one else like them. So that's the challenge that we have in building a winning team, is to treat people like winners, combine together with God's people and God's team and His vision. And it's amazing how many people that aren't even represented here that'll be a part of your winning team. Last year at Easter, you've heard part of this story. I went to the barber shop, as I do. Even though I don't have hair, you have to get haircuts. It's one of the sad news that you have, that even when you're bald, you have to get haircuts, actually more often. And I went to the barber shop I always go to, and I sat down with a young man, and he was not here too long from Vietnam, and he said, what are you going to do for Easter? And I said, well, I'm going to celebrate life. He said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm a pastor, and I explained the whole Easter story. And he said, you know, I've always wanted to be a Christian. For like 7 years, I've been waiting for someone to invite me to be a Christian. And I said, well, why don't you come to our church and become a Christian this Easter? And so he did. And he came forward and he prayed with me after the service. He was living with his girlfriend. They decided to get married. They had a child. And he lives about an hour from here, and he found a really good Vietnamese church to go to. And so yesterday I went in to get my hair cut. And there was Tony. And the first thing he always says when I go in, this place is just packed on Saturdays. Pastor Tim, my pastor. Well, he's only been to our church once, but I'm still his pastor. And he said, I'm so glad. He goes, where have you been all this time? I said, well, I had surgery. And he said, I've been waiting for weeks. And right behind where he cuts hair, he wasn't cutting my hair. He had his baptism certificate that he pulled out and said, I want to show this to you. I got baptized. God's blessing our family. It's amazing what God's doing. And I wish you just knew his whole story. It's an incredible story. So after I had my hair cut by another gentleman, I went over and I paid and gave him a tip. And I reached in my billfold and I went over to Tony and I said, Tony, baptism is like a birthday. It's where all the believers get to celebrate who you are and the mystery and the wonder of your life. And so I said, here's $5. That's just because I'm excited about your baptism. There were 4 other barbers there, and each one of them said, we'll get baptized for $5. But that's not the way it works, is it? We don't do it for money. We do it because of this loving relationship that we have with God, which we continue throughout our lives to learn more and more. We don't think he can forgive, and he surprises us by his forgiveness. We don't think he can cause us to love someone that's not like us, and he surprises us in the way that we do it. And we continue to relate to him, not just sign the back of a card and disappear forever. We bind with a family, just like that little girl did with the duck. We imprint with them. We love them. We realize they need them. They need us as much as we need them. And I need you. And you. It makes such a difference to me that you're here today. And one another, like Cheryl looks around and says, this is my family. It's the family of God in a broken world that's troubled by quarrelsome and disconnect and ready to explode. And love is the answer. Choose love. Stand with me for a closing benediction. Or don't stand with me. We have guided prayer. Sit down.